Play the fucking track. Play the fucking track. Dude, does anybody remember that song? I don't even, in the moment right now, I can't remember who that was. It's so obvious too because it's so mainstream, right? It's stuck in my head. Oh my God. But welcome back to the RMP, guys. I'm Zachary, your host of this motherfucking podcast, and we're here to question the mess, make some rebel actions, and live life on our own terms. Now, I hope you guys are following what I mean. Sometimes I get so up in my own business about what the fuck it is that I'm trying to say that I hope it's coming across somewhat clear. I've had too many girlfriends. Oh God, this is bad. I've had too many girlfriends tell me that I'm cryptic or that I am, what is the word? Tactically vulnerable. I think that was the other one. Like I don't really give information, and when I do, it comes across very planned out. Anyway, that's my mind. But yeah, like I said, I hope you guys are really understanding what we're trying to do here. I'm trying to promote individuality. I'm trying to promote skepticism. I'm trying to get people to question from a neutral zone, to take away your bias, to take away your justifications on things, to take away any point of opposition, to look at things objectively and tackle them, because that's where I think true wisdom actually fucking comes from. That's where I think it actually comes from, is when you can make sense of things apart from your emotions. And yeah, I guess that's kind of a basic stoicism. It's a generalized stoicism, I guess. But I think that's really how we learn. I think that's really how we learn from each other, and I think that's really, really how we learn from ourselves. But the big message is to question fucking everything. And I'm not just talking about the things that come across in our media. I'm talking about questioning, like being so self-aware and being so mindful of what's going on in your head that you are questioning your habits, you're questioning your reactions, you're questioning your intentions and your instincts for the sake of finding the best way. And the reason I say this is I think we get so habitual in the way that we do things and the way that we think that we stop growing and we become in pain and we stop processing and we stop healing because we do not question repeatedly enough. Does that make sense? And so when I say question everything, I mean that in the biggest possible sense that I can, in every complexity that I can, to pay attention to every little tidbit that you pick up on, that you're mindful of, to make assessments, to be skeptical, to I don't know, to process in a way that makes you think outside of yourself, makes you think outside of your own biases. Anyways, I'm talking in circles here, but I hope you guys are doing fucking amazing. Really, guys, I just wrote a piece talking about how spectacular this life is. And I think it's really important to recognize that. I don't think that we need to wait for somebody to tell us that is so. I don't think that we need to have somebody catch us in our worst moment and pick us up to know that is so. And life is really amazing. It's just fucking hard. It's just fucking hard. But let's move on. I hope you guys are kicking ass. I hope you guys are finding whatever ways you need to train, whatever, physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, doing all those fucking things to make yourself better. We always just want to get better. What have I done? I went to a boxing class with a friend. That kicked my ass. I forgot what cardio was like. Every part of me in my body hurt. And I also moved, and my anxiety's been up the whole weekend. It's crazy to actually recognize when your anxiety's up and noticing what it's coming from and being in control of it enough to tamp it down when you need to, and also to allow it its space and assess it as we need to. But beyond that, not too much is going on. I really want you guys to be excited about who you're listening to. I talked to Muscle Madz again and she brought on another guy, and I'm so grateful that she did. His name's Mike Russell Jr. He is a mental performance coach is a really good way to put it. Psychological performance when it comes to athletics, I think. And Mike, if you're listening, don't kill me on this. I hope that's kind of the best way to give your expertise. But this guy's super smart. We went over a lot of anecdotal things. It brought in a lot of relativity and clarity between all of us and trying to understand the position on this. And he goes over, by definition, what this is and the importance of like self-awareness and mental practices and finding the answers inside of us, and the importance of mental performance as an athlete on the platform when we're performing, and in the gym when we're doing the daily grind, and allowing ourselves to pay attention to what keeps us going. So I don't want to give too much away, but Mike Russell is a fantastic human. And by the way, ladies, he's actually super pretty. He's super pretty. He's far prettier than I am. So you might want to look into that. He's gonna kill me. I don't even know if he's single. But I mean, hey, everybody likes to check out man meat, right? Everybody likes to check out meat. God, I'm digging myself a fucking hole. Okay, without any further ado, this is episode 104 with Mike Russell Jr. and Muscle Madz. I hope you guys enjoy. Dude, I like it. So before we get too carried away, it's just my curiosity just like coming out already, because this is going to be big for me. But tell everybody who you are, tell everybody what you do. And you kind of gave us an idea of kind of how that came to be, but what is the motivation there for you, like in the long run? So go ahead and tell us who you are, and then I'll have Madz come in
official title would be I'm a mental performance coach. So I'm a specialist in sport and performance psychology. I basically just help athletes train the mental side and help them perform better. The mind is a tricky thing, and it can be trained the same way the body can. And instead of things happening on accident, we put systems in place to do things on purpose and have our mind work for us. There's a Navy SEAL saying, and they say you don't rise to the occasion, you fall to the level of your training. So we expect in the moment, like, oh, well, I'm mentally tough, my mind's gonna work for me. Some people are special like that. Most of us need to do some work, so we're prepared for that. So we're prepared for that moment when we need to be that person. We've trained to be there. So yeah.
That's good, man. Madz, can you come in and tell everybody who you are? I'm sure everybody's heard our last episode, but I want to make sure they know who's speaking on the other end.
Yeah, for sure. Hi, my name's Madeline, Madz for short, Muscle Madz on the gram. Powerlifting coach, personal trainer, nutritionist. And then how I know Mike, he was helping a lot of my other powerlifting friends, and they were seeing some improvement in their lifts. And I had just gotten over a serious back injury. We didn't really talk about it much on the podcast, but essentially I was deadlifting to not great form, not the right amount of weight, too much weight. And I pulled, I think it was like my QL. I thought I herniated a disc at the time, but I didn't, thank God. So I was out for about 6 months before I was back to like training. It's okay. It's all good now. But definitely getting back under the bar, I was having like panic attacks and breathing issues, and mental thoughts were going crazy. So when I mentioned this to some of my girlfriends at the gym, they were saying, oh, well, I'm seeing the sports psychologist, Mike. He's building up like clientele. You should reach out to him. I was like, oh, okay. So then we had a couple sessions and took lots of notes. And then everything we talked about, I still like implement to my training today, with breathing. And hell, I was having a bad squat day on Wednesday. So I had to implement some of those as well. And then everything was fine.
Well, and sometimes I think we don't realize how big of a deal that is. Maybe it's because, for some of us, we've been in it for a while. I think that there's a mindset struggle that I may not understand as the same way some other people do, because I've just been doing it since I was a teenager. Like I've been into weightlifting since I was a teenager. But I think this is a good place to start, Mike, because I think this will give us some relativity here. So you are helping Madz, and you are helping Madz around an injury and that mental game. So, and you know, that's different coming in with an injury when you're used to coming in healthy and like everything's working fine. Everything's going the way that you really want it to. Madz seems really dedicated and disciplined to what she does. So, but then all of a sudden she has an injury. So what do you do to assess that when it comes to this mental performance coaching?
As far as an injury, I mean, the first thing is trying to figure out like where in that response to injury they are, whether it's a fresh injury, whether they're coming out of rehab or in the middle of rehab, or whether they are returning to play. Those are like the three phases they call it for as far as response to injury. And so that's the first step, is figuring out where they are. I mean, if they're in that first step where they are just currently injured, like recently injured, then the approach is a lot different, and it's trying to get them just some social support around them and get them trying to not be in so much pain. You know, there's certain imagery types that help with pain management and relaxation techniques to help with the pain management and those kind of things. You know, once they're in the rehab room and they're in physical therapy, then, you know, the steps trying to get them to start thinking about being out there again and start trying to visualize those things. And, you know, imagery is one of the most powerful things we have. I mean, it's the most studied tool in sports psychology, and you can implement it in a bunch of different ways. One good story was Dominic Cruz, a UFC fighter, when he was coming back from 2 really bad knee injuries, and he got offered a title fight on like 8 weeks notice, and he hadn't been training. He'd just been doing rehab stuff and everything. But, you know, he was working with the sports psych. He was working with therapists and the sports psych both. But, and he said he'd been doing the mental training this whole time. So he'd just been doing that. And the really cool thing with imagery, as far as that mental practice, like mentally rehearsing what you're going to do out there on the field or the platform, whatever. The way it works is, you know, our motor neurons in our brain send a signal to our body, right? Of how to move. So when you imagine doing something, the same motor neurons that fire when you actually do it will fire when you just think about it. So literally you build that connection between your mind and your body so much stronger. And your mind literally mentally practices. Your mind thinks you did that. You know, your mind thinks you're doing this movement. And the more you do it, the stronger those images get. The better you get at imagery. And the stronger those motor neural patterns become. And so, you know, as far as when they're in that phase of the rehab process, you know, you want to really start to incorporate that. So even though they're not even on the field yet or on the platform yet like that, you're still practicing and your mind's getting ready to be out there. And then that third phase, that return to play, the big thing is the confidence, you know, because at that point, you know, whoever is working with them as far as their PT, and they're approving them to go full out, the hard thing there is confidence. I mean, you know, we've all come back from injury, and the big thing is like, oh, is this going to happen again? You know, and trying to get them as confident as possible. And, you know, you use past success, and, you know, you use, you know, what they're doing in the rehab room, and you use all those things to try to build them up so they're ready when they go out there, go at it again.
Yeah, I had, and Madz, you might be able to relate to this a little bit. I mean, I've never had major serious injury I have from riding dirt bikes, but that's a whole nother thing. But when it comes to actual athletic training, I've never had any major injury, except back when I very first started powerlifting, like a year out, I was, you know, you have those newbie gains, right? Like everything's just like your body's just adapting like crazy. And you get a little overconfident. I think, you know, maybe that tends to lead to new injury for new lifters. But I remember squatting heavy with an SSB, and we're doing box squats. And I remember being like 2 inches off the box, and I lost all my tension, and my butt like plopped on the box. And I had this like searing pain in my lower back, and I couldn't stand back up. Like I was completely immobile, and I couldn't get anything to work. And I think maybe mentally, I wasn't going to do anything. I don't know if my body would have done it or not. I don't know. But yeah, like after that injury, I was so scared to even get back under a regular power bar with 45s on it. Like I didn't want to squat at all. And maybe, I mean, this has got to be where something like what you do is crucial then, because you can actually help people. Cause it was months before I think I stepped back under a bar. And I think the only way I was capable of doing that was just pushing myself and having some confidence in my body, I guess, so what type of things did you go through with, like, say, Madz? And Madz, jump in and like with whatever you experienced, from your side. But what did you guys do with Madz whenever she had her injury, and like you're getting her to get back to the platform, or doing particular exercises? What was that like?
So, well, it was a combination, because my coach, he knew I switched from conventional to sumo because of that injury. So he was working with limited range of motion on all the lifts. So lots of like leg supported Larson presses on bench, lots of machine work or some dumbbell work. And then with squat, it was high box squats. And then deadlift, it was like very, very high box pulls, sumo stance. And we just did what we could, but that was
without
like
using that part of your body, I guess. Too much pressure there.
Yeah. And then rebuilding the brace. And then I also saw a massage therapist, or he's a sports massage therapist. Kelly, I'm going to butcher his last name, Schlager. I think he owns another gym, STS Performance here. So it was a combination of him helping me. And then like once I was better and the PT signed me off, the physical therapist was like, "Oh, you're good now. You can go back to lifting." Then it was just like, I don't want to. I wanted to, obviously. So that's when it was Kelsey, and I think it was Kelsey that pushed me to go talk to Mike. And it started with just talking for like an hour, and
Really?
I just kind of like, well, it was a very therapeutic session. I'll talk about it because I'm open. I know he has to keep that stuff confidential, but I'll say it. I cried like 6 times, and it was just letting out all the stress of everything that was going on in my life. But then I realized like what was really keeping me from going underneath the bar. And then I don't know, we met like three or four times, and everyone was a little bit different. I think the first one, the bit was he was making me just aware of my anxiety levels. So we did like red, yellow, green, or green, yellow, red, in certain situations, just in everyday life, like sitting in traffic, I'm like a yellow, sitting here in my office, I'm a green. And then, like if I would go to get under the bar for a squat, it's like, oh, I'm at a red right now. So that was like one of the first ones. Mike, go ahead, take over if you want.
Oh, no, go ahead. You finish up.
Oh, okay. That was the first thing, was awareness. And then I think we worked on breathing. Was it in for 4, hold for 2, out for 6? I think I forget the numbers exactly. And just being aware of the breathing to bring the heart rate down a little bit. And that's when I learned I get really too amped up with squats, and then I have short, shallow breath, and then I can't brace properly, and that's when I lose the lift. So becoming aware of that was very important. So even today, I'll like when I go for PRs and I like play my song and I like press the camera to record, I'm like hand on chest, like trying to bring my heart rate down, because I was like, oh, I can feel it ticking up and I'm not gonna be able to brace. So I take a moment and I center, and my coach waits and he's like, "You good?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I'm good." And then we sit down and we wrap, and then we go for it. But just taking a moment to be present and prepare myself for the lift has been very, very helpful. So like this past week, shit wasn't feeling good. It was heavy. Wasn't moving like I wanted it to. So I just needed to take a minute and it was one of those moments where it was just like, hey, just do the work, because it wasn't like PRs, it was just like reps. So it was just focusing on like 1 to 2 cues and like removing myself from what the weight was on the bar. Not thinking about like, oh, you're never going to make this total. No, it was just think of 1 or 2 cues, get under the bar and execute the lift. And that's how I made it through that workout.
Okay. So, all right, Mike. So as you're going through this with Madeline, what's the assessment that you're making? Like, how are you helping her get from stage to stage? And obviously, like if there's confidential information, you obviously don't have to divulge that, but generally, I guess, like what are you doing and what are you assessing? Like, what are you seeing as you're taking her through this?
I mean, first off, it's just really cool to hear that she still implements that stuff. And, you know, when hearing her talk about it, and, you know, like when she talked about doing the traffic lights exercise, you know, and then you see her level of awareness there in that moment in her training, you know, that's the point. Like, you know, awareness is the key to everything, you know what I mean? Like, as far as this, you can't implement any of the psychological skills unless you're aware of what's going on. Mm-hmm. And so that's why, like, I have athletes practice that, you know, just in everyday life. Like, let's just practice just being aware of where you're at. And then you have tools in place where, you know, you can get yourself where you want to be. You know, like, so people use different ways to build awareness. I'm not a good meditator, so I don't usually make my clients meditate. You know, like, I'm one of those, like, I try it for a couple of days and I won't do it for like a week, you know.
Same, dude.
Yeah. So like, I don't try to force that on my clients, but that's what, you know, that mindfulness meditation is. That's straight just mental training. You're just building your awareness and building that strength of bringing your thoughts back in, you know, because that's what it is. So, you know, focus on the breath. Your thoughts are going to go somewhere else. It's okay. Don't judge yourself, bring it back. So it's a similar thing of just trying to deliberately build that awareness. Also, like, I want to touch on, she mentioned her arousal levels for the squat, realizing she needed to bring that down a little bit. And that's one of it's a very unique thing in powerlifting, right? It's a very unique sport in that it's very, very high arousal levels, you know, when you're under the bar. And then you have 15 minutes where you got to be relaxed. And then you get very high again. You know, you do that 3 times and then you take an hour and a half to get as low as possible.
Yeah.
You know, so it's difficult. It's a kind of difficult sport to manage with that. And so there's one theory I work off a lot with that. It's called individual zones of optimal functioning. Basically what it means is every sport and every person needs to be at different arousal levels for their performance, right? You know, so even in powerlifting, it's different from lift to lift for person to person, you know. So, you know, you may need to bring it down a notch for squat. You need to turn it up a notch for deadlift, right? And so it's finding the sweet spot for yourself, having that awareness to find the sweet spot for yourself for each lift. And I always make a comparison because you get a lot of these powerlifting coaches that really just want their athletes to be like them. You know, if they're a very high arousal level lifter, they want to slap everybody in the back and get riled up, you know. And I always compare, the two comparisons I make is, so Ed Cohen is the greatest powerlifter of all time. And he's a very, very,
can anybody deny that?
Right. And he would tell people, like, you don't need to do all that jumping down and this and that. You're wasting your energy. Okay. Because that's how he lifted. That's how he was successful. And then I don't know if you remember, what Benedict Magnuson was the first guy to pull 1,000 in powerlifting, right? You know, and when he did it,
am I even a powerlifter? I didn't know that.
Huh?
I didn't know that. I'm not even a powerlifter. So
Benedict Magnuson, yeah, he's a strong man. He competed in powerlifting too, but
okay,
he deadlifted 1,000 for the first time, no straps or anything. But he's sitting there like 10 feet from the bar, yelling Icelandic slurs at it, right? Screaming at the top of his lungs, and then he runs up and picks it up. And you know, I tell people, which one's right? Yeah. Which one's right? Right? You know, and the truth is, it's just whatever works for you. And so it's doing that work like Madz did to figure out, like, where do I need to be for this lift? What's best for me? You know, and that reflection of going back and thinking about your best performances and your best lifts, and like, what was I at? What was my mindset at? And, you know, so when she talked about the conversation, that long conversation, I mean, everything we do in sports psychology is based off the research, based off the science and stuff, right? The art is really in that, being able to be in that conversation with the person and make them feel like it's a safe space to open up everything, and trying to ask the right questions at the right times, trying to steer them towards these answers, because the answer is always inside, right? Like, I don't have any magic ways to tell you what to feel or tell you what to think. The answers are inside the person. I just got to try to navigate that with them. And then we kind of discover that together. And, the athletes can usually tell you right away. It's so funny. Like, you'll ask somebody when they come out of a bad meet, like, oh, well, where were you at when you did this? Where were you at mentally? This and that. Then you go back, like, all right, go back to your best meet. What were you doing? So, like, oh, I was doing this and this and this. Like, so why don't you do that every time? Right.
That's exactly the paperwork, that sheet that you gave me that you made me do. Yeah, it was the, where were you at your best, where were you at your worst? And it was when I realized that I'm like a lifter of love and happiness and not anger and violence, which is fine. If you need a slap on the back, that's fine. I need like a squeeze on the shoulder and tell me I'm strong and I can go do it. And the last meet, not nationals, but the one that my comeback meet, I was listening to 80s music and dancing on the sideline the entire time. And that kept totally me in my, right. And then it kept me in my Zen mode, and it kept me happy. And then, coach like gives me like the 2 out, and I take my headphones off and I watch the person before me, and then they give me a pep talk, and then I go and do it. And it was a great meet. Like, everything was great, and I was having a lot of fun. I didn't have any high expectations, because it was just to like get that confidence back. So then, nationals comes around, and then we push it, and it's like, we know where to be at. So yeah, happiness.
No, I mean, that obviously shows in your media. Like, that's just who you are. I think that's one of the first things that I complimented you on, was the way that you present yourself, and it comes off very authentic and real. And I think maybe, Mike, tell me if this sounds off, or maybe there's some psychological benefit, or maybe there's something special about this, but it seems like powerlifting, the logistics side of it is the same. Like you said, we know the science, we know the way that things work best when it comes to biomechanics and, our anatomy and our diet and all those things that go into, and that could be for any sport too, not even just powerlifting. But, we see powerlifting as a strength sport, and we almost get bias in the way that we think it should be approached. Because I think a lot of people are like that, and assume that there's this crazy, dark, heavy metal kind of attitude when it comes towards powerlifting. And I can't even see Madz doing something like that. Like, that doesn't even fit her character. So it's almost like you have to separate or compartmentalize the logistics of powerlifting, but make sure that the approach is unique. Maybe. Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we all seen like the history of powerlifting, and when it was all geared lifters and everything, and it was just heavy metal, and guys totally headbutting each other, so it's evolved a lot since then. Raw lifting really changed that, and the influx of women powerlifters has really changed that. The women in powerlifting, it's crazy the numbers women are putting up. That's why the women
scares the shit out of me.
Yeah, the women's like Wilks scores and
watch out.
Because they never imagined women would do this. They never imagined the women's numbers now, like things that were an elite total 10 years ago don't even get you ranked now for a woman. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's just insane what the women are doing up there, but it's great for the sport. It really is. That's probably the best thing that's happened to the sport, I think, is the influx of women. And
oh, totally.
Yeah, 100% agree. I love the brands like Girls Who Powerlift, or Girl with like 3 R's, and then Sisters of Iron. Like, all of those are great. I love the brand of what they represent, and like seeing them at nationals with all of them, I was like, yeah, this is some good energy. Like, just my flight of women. And at nationals, like, we're all supporting each other. We're all like cheering each other on to the warm-ups, and like checking in with one another in between attempts. Like, hey, you good? Like, do you need anything? Like, I was like, holy shit, this is so supportive. I love this.
No, I think it's fantastic. I think it's helped kind of round off or balance the community a little bit, maybe, and really shown potential for a lot of fucking people. When I went to nationals, there were some women there that like absolutely blew my mind at the USPA nationals. It was absolutely crazy. This is kind of a kind of an out there more question, and this is just maybe an intuitive or instinctive answer, Mike. But do you notice a difference in the way that women handle things and the way that men handle things when it comes to this mental performance stuff?
Definitely.
Is it kind of the same types of practices? Is it all the logistics, or am I?
I mean, people are going to be individually different anyways.
Yeah.
There's some things that tend to be more. It was funny when she's talking about the women and having fun in the flight and everything. And one thing that's different in the research between men and women, and the research was the team sports, right? And so with team sports, in men's sports, they don't have to like each other to play with each other. They don't have to get along. They have to be friends. They can put all that. They don't have to they put all aside. Like, I want to go win. I don't care if I don't like you. You're my teammate, so I need you. We're going to go win. Where in women's sports, they need that bond. Women will literally, if they don't like their teammates, they will not play as well. So it's funny when she talked about how supportive they were. And it's not like the guys don't support each other in powerlifting, but not the same way the women do. You see the women literally taking care of each other like that out there. The guy, he may dap you up. He's worried about himself. So it's funny you see that, even though this is individual sport, to still see that in the competition that show up, that they have that almost team like bond, right? Like she's talking about in this individual sport. So that's kind of cool. I got lost. What else was it about that difference between men and women?
Yeah.
I mean, other than that, there's nothing really in the research that I know of is different. And in my experience, I know there's different. The only real difference in women are a lot more likely, and this is just anecdotal, women are a lot more likely to tell their friends that they're working, with the performance coach, they're working with the sports psych guy. I was working with this MMA fighter, right? And we did some good work, and I went to go watch his fight. And then we met up afterwards, and some of his teammates are there, and he just says, "This is my friend, Mike." You know what I mean? I was like, I spent more on the tickets than he paid me. It'd be nice if you gave me a little reference.
Yeah.
Sadly, there's still like a stigma of men seeing therapists. Yeah, it's unfortunate. I think there's slow change, just like we talk about like women lifting more weights. I think we talked about that in the last podcast. Like, we're slowly getting more women into strength training. I think we're slowly starting to get more men to accept that it's okay to therapy, and it's okay to talk about it, and it's okay to not talk about it as well. Like, if you don't want to blast on your social media, just got back from therapy, like you don't have to do that. But if you and your buddies are talking and you're having a hard time, like, hey man, why don't you go to therapy? Or like, hey, this is my therapist, maybe they can connect you with someone. Like, that needs to be a more normalized conversation of like, hey, where do you get your car to go get fixed? Where do you go to help your brain? But slow steps, slowly but surely.
Definitely. That's a good analogy.
I honestly don't. I think, to me, I think that's more, it's a programmed thing. I think men instinctively want to be at the top of a hierarchy. I think men enjoy status. I think men enjoy independence. But we're not going to get too far into this because this is a completely different subject on male masculinity issues. But I think it's an insecurity that was built on lack of emotional intelligence and lack of acceptance. And it plays off like men's psychological idea that they're somehow going to be exiled if they can't handle things all their own. And I think it's, kind of a plethora of all the, collaboration of all these things, I don't know, Mike, you're male. What do you think on that? I mean, it's kind of messy. It's kind of messy. Most trolls are male. So. Oh,
seriously. Short story real quick about that. Actually, with I forget who it was, but my husband was telling me that I think he was like a gunny or someone higher up in the ranks, was an advocate for having his guys and girls go to therapy if they need it because they offer it on base. And he's like, I go every day at 5:00 at noon. I sit for an hour with Dr. I forget the name. And I have a therapy session. So every Friday, hey, where's Gunny? Blah, blah, blah. He's like, oh, he's at his therapy session. And you can go back and like look at his schedule and you're going to see every Friday at noon, he goes to therapy. And so he's going to therapy and he's sitting down, he's talking to the doc, and the psychologist was like, is there anything that you need help with? Like, I'm happy to talk with you as long as you want, but they just talked about fishing or the weather or, what they were having for dinner. And the Gunny said, I'm good. If I have anything, I will let you know. I'm doing this as an example for my men and my women to make sure that they know that there's not a stigma and this is accepted. And if I'm doing it, they can do it too. And he's still going. He doesn't really talk much about like mental stuff. It's more just like shooting the shit, but at least he's going and he's making it acceptable for all his guys and girls to go as well.
Oh, no. Hell yeah. So Mike, let's ask you this then. So have you noticed, is there a difference in numbers? Like, males having resistance to hiring somebody like you? Like, do you tend to have more women? I don't know if this is a loaded question or not, but what is that like? Do you see that male resistance on your end of things?
Well, one thing I'll point out, she was talking about her husband in the military. Actually, the number one employer of mental performance coaches is the military. Military hires more mental performance coaches than anybody.
Really?
I mean, think about the skills, like, if you use these skills in a sport, compared to like when your life's on the line, like what's more important, you know what I mean? So like having those systems in place to be prepared for that. And so the military invests a lot into that. As far as my own personal practice, I do have more women athletes than I do male athletes. As a whole, I'm not sure how that is for the industry, because a lot of times it's a team. It's a team that's hiring somebody, and so
so it's like a team environment most of the time.
Yeah, like so a lot of times they'll require everybody to go to talk to the people. Yeah, so I mean, I'm not sure the exact numbers, but I know in my own personal practice, I have more female athletes than male athletes, and the women tend to be a lot more open with the other people in their lives about what they're doing, and wanted to share that. But I mean, it's like you said, it's a tough subject, as far as I mean, it's not even therapy. What I'm doing is not therapy. It's performance related, but still it's that space, and we're going to talk, and sometimes other stuff comes out, and Madz mentioned, she broke down a couple times in the conversation, and I'm pretty sure every male athlete I've had in there has broken down at some point, but I think kind of going along that, I mean, as men, it's harder to find that safe space where you can let out some of that stuff.
Yeah.
And if you're resistant to going to see even me or like someone like a therapist that's going to get you those places, once you have that space, it's going to come out. Once you feel comfortable in that space, it's all going to come out. So, in that situation, it's just, I'm just trying to be there to listen. And, once we kind of navigate through those things, then we get back towards the sport, But a lot of that, it's just developing, when you're in that situation, it's just developing rapport and building trust, and, letting them know I'm here to listen no matter what. Like, doesn't mean I can, it's not ethical for me to work with them as a therapist. But I'm still going to listen. I'm still going to be there for them. And then, when we get back to the performance side, then I'll start adding my 2 cents.
Yeah. And that's kind of a good segue. I mean, because I know even when you're completely alone, like you're completely isolated from other people, my self-awareness has gotten better. But there's legitimately situations where I'm like, why the fuck can I not cry? Like nobody is here to see me. My dog's right here, my little cuddle buddy. Like, why can I not? What is it inside of me as a male? What are those resistance measures that are keeping me from just like, because I know something is up. I know I'm mad or resentful or sad or doubtful about something. And I'm like, why can't I just cry like the girls watching the movies? Like, I'm open to it, but it's like some crazy internal ridiculous thing. But we are kind of getting to more of like a therapeutic style of things. So if anybody out there doesn't really understand, I know I wouldn't have if I hadn't had a little bit of history of coaching. What is the difference between like a therapy and or counselor compared to like mental performance coaching?
So I mean, the work I'm doing is just basically trying to help you perform better, enjoy your performance more, enjoy your
Directly
sport
related to sport.
Yeah. And, it doesn't mean if there's things going on in your life, we can't talk about it because everything affects the sport.
Mm-hmm.
And so definitely we touch on those things. As far as a therapist, they're going to work more with like clinical issues. Like as far as if they have depression, anxiety disorder, any kind of personality disorders. If it starts to get into that realm, ethically, I can't really help them with that stuff. It's not my place, I would try to like help them find somebody to help them with that. That would be a thing. Most of the time, the people I've worked with that have been dealing with that too already have their own therapist. And of course, those things do pop up as far as your performance. And so then we figure out how to manage those for the performance. A lot of that's just talking about what they've worked with as a therapist and, figuring out how to put tools in place to work through that in the performance. You know what I mean? So like I have a client, she has generalized anxiety disorder and, she sees psychiatrist, Madz, she sees a therapist to talk to, and then there's me, and so of course those issues affected her performance. And so we talked about that, but a lot of it was, how do we manage that for the performance, right? Not so much how do we manage that for life and for everything else. That's the therapist's job. And I wouldn't want to step on their toes in that situation. And a lot of it, like I said, is just in the conversations asking them a lot of times, what do they do on that side? And then sometimes I could figure out some of the tools they're using over there, we can modify for the sport. How can we use that to leverage to help you in this environment?
Mm-hmm. Well, and so this is something that I was curious about because it's like, Madz, you'll kind of get this a little bit, is when you're going off like an RPE in training, right? And you just feel horrible. Like you feel like shit and you just don't even want to train. So obviously there's a miscommunication between your mind and your body, right? So I guess as far as mental performance on the sports side of things, are you trying to get people to be able to handle situations better or peak better? I mean, ultimately you want everybody to be better at their sport or whatever they're doing, correct? But like, is it detailed differently for everybody? Like, what's that ultimate goal?
Ultimate goal is just to perform better, more optimally, to think better, to perform better on a more consistent basis. When you think about your best competitions, you're not always going to reach your best competitions, but that top 80%, you should be able to get around there. Right. So it's putting systems in place to get there and, enjoy your sport. When your mind's working for you, you enjoy it a lot more. As far as if some of that whole, like, I'm not feeling it today thing, and that happens, you got to kind of just get over it. You want to try to
suck it up,
that's
bro.
The truth. You want to kind of get them in the mindset where, I don't have to feel good to do what I have to do. I don't have to feel good to perform, right? Because, how often are you 100%? You're never 100%, right? So needing to be 100% to perform, that's never going to happen. Like if you're at a competition and you're not feeling it, what are they going to do? Move the competition?
Yeah.
You're gonna go home.
You guys wait a
What are
couple
you gonna
days.
get over it? Get over it. That's it. You know, you're when you're alone on that platform, you know, you are who you are. You got what you got, right?
Oh,
So
yeah.
you might as well control the things within your control. You can't get any stronger at that point. The technique can get you better at that point, right? So what can you control? You can control your focus. You can control yourself. You can control your arousal levels, you know. And so you focus on those things and just do what you got to do. You know, you're never going to be 100%. But I mean, being mentally tough is, I got 70%. Can you give me 100% of that 70% on this next attempt? Being present right here, you know, can you give me 100% of that 70%? That's mentally tough. That's being mentally tough, right?
That was me at nationals. My tank was at 70%, but I gave 100%. I think you were kind of like, you were just about to hit the nail on the head, but part of also what you do is being able to, I don't want to say compartmentalize, but the analogy I always use is like 2 train tracks and 1 train, just keep moving throughout the day, not thinking about the past and letting it affect you, whether it was a lift, a game, a play, whatever, and focusing on the task at hand. And then once that's done, the next one. So like squats didn't go well. Okay, what can we do to make bench go well? Bench went really well. All right, good. Let's gear up and go for deadlifts. Whether your tank is at 70, 50, 90, whatever it's at, giving it 100% and not dwelling on like, oh, squats were really bad, so my whole day's not ruined. Keep going. Yeah. I don't know what that's called though. That's not, I guess it would be like partially like compartmentalization, but like, I don't know, like just task resilience. I don't know. There's gotta be a definition for that.
I think just simply being present, you know, being where your feet are, you know,
be where your feet are. Yeah.
Be right here, you know. There's something, if I'm working with like saying pilots, and I'm working with somebody consistently going to the meet, one thing that I have in training is like a between attempts kind of reset, right? And so whether what you just kind of like what you just said, whether what you just did was bad or good, you got to put it behind you and think about what's in front of you, right? So my own experience, one time I remember I had my second attempt squat was a PR for that weight class, right? And when I went out and for my third attempt and I missed my third attempt afterwards, I was like, man, I wasn't even there for that. I was like, I think I could have gotten it, but I wasn't even there. I was just kind of satisfied with the last one. I didn't put myself in the mind frame to be ready for this one, you know? So whether it was good or bad, you got to let that go, you know? So I usually have some kind of breathing technique to kind of bring them back to center and try to bring them, you know, then some other kind of technique, kind of bring them into the present, and then cool, let's go now. You know, I got that from one of my mentors. He was working with the basketball team, and he did that. Every guy that came off the court, you know, they had to sit down, close their eyes or put a towel over their head, whatever, you know, take these 5-10 deep breaths. Okay, let that go. Now we'll be back to the present, paying attention to the game. We're back in it. But yeah, whether it was good or bad, you gotta let it go, you know.
No, I think we're onto something a little bit here. So from my own experience, I remember being at nationals. We have too many powerlifters in the room here. It's all about powerlifting today. But in saying that, I think that powerlifters build a mentality that a lot of people just don't get, because you're approaching something you've never done before over and over again. Especially, you know, like in a competition, like a lot of us like to get small PRs. Like we get super excited about that. But I think what most people aren't used to is the fact that even in the gym, like we're always approaching something new. And that's part of progressive overload too, right, Maddie? Kind of is like you're.
Yes.
Sorry. But yeah, you're always approaching something new. And I think people are super scared, especially when it comes to weight. There's something so obvious about something that can crush you. You have no idea where you can do it. And what my philosophy has been, and what I've tried to tell other new lifters, is like, when it comes to maximal load, I think that it sways more towards the mental resilience and capacity than it does the physical. Like when you're that close to maximal load, is it your body failing or is it your mind failing? And I think more often than not, there's polls where I was like, there's no way my body would have done that. But I think more often than not, like our mind quits before our body quits. At nationals, my first deadlift was not great, but I pulled it, and then my second one was slower. And then when I went to go for my third, my whole focus was hitting a new number that I'd never hit before, and that was the fastest one that I pulled. I could have pulled another 10 or 15 pounds for sure. So, what do you guys think about that? I'm looking for honest opinion here, because I think the mental aspect of it, and maybe this has something to do with like really good mental performance, is what things are like when you're at maximal load.
Yeah.
Take it,
100%.
anybody.
I watch. Oh, no, I got you real quick. Like a couple examples. I watch like Joe Sullivan. He trains and takes ice baths, and that's not for recovery. That's not for inflammation. That's for mental strength. That's for being in a very cold plunge, submerged in water for 10, however many minutes. So he has to focus on his breathing. Granted, that guy is like a freaking superhero and can squat God knows how much, but a lot of that's mental and physical. My coach is making me do a shit ton of AMRAPs on bench, on deadlift, and it's making me want to puke. But the mental state you get in, it's like, and your friends are cheering for you, like, and that's a whole other aspect of the community. But when people are saying like, you've got one more, like over and over again, and you just do it, even though like you want to puke, your heart rate's in your throat, and you just keep going. Same with like bench, you got someone spotting you. Don't worry about the weight falling on you. You're safe. Just keep going. Just keep pushing. And I've noticed that all my last lifts, they're grinders, but I make it. Yeah. So as that's like my mental training of what I'm doing. I really enjoy these AMRAPs. But I know that every high elite power athlete, a couple I can think off the bat, Joe Sullivan was the first one. They all have their mental training that they do for when it gets to maximal load.
Definitely. I know Huberman Lab talks a lot about that, like as far as building that resilience and stuff. Yeah, and I mean, there's the sports psych for the Seahawks, Michael Gervais. He says the most powerful thing you can say to yourself is, "I can do hard things." So I can do hard things.
I like that.
How do you get to say that to yourself? How do you earn the right to say that to yourself? You got to do hard things. You have to do hard things to say, I can do hard things. And so when you're in that moment, you believe it, right? Competence builds confidence, So like, you got to do the hard things. So that way, when you're there, I can do hard things. I've done hard things. I've been through this. I can do this again, I think a lot of times we talk about those max effort attempts. I mean, when I'm working with athletes, we're trying to build different tools. You want different tools for different situations, right? And so you can approach everything different depending on where your mindset's there. A lot of times you just want your mind to stay out of your way, So like external focus is a big thing. There's a lot of research in that. Like if you're a high level performer, not focusing internally on how your body feels, or where this is at, or my lat's firing, this and that, and just all external focus. You're a deadlift, you just, I'm going to push the earth away, and instead of worrying about like, oh, is my butt in the right place, or am I feeling it here? Bill Kashmir talked about, imagine his arms as pistons when he bench pressed, and, he's just firing pistons. He wasn't worried about like, is this correct, or I'm in this right position, or, my lat's tight enough, he's just firing off. And so there's different, techniques to get us there. Even some imagery techniques. So like I was telling one of my clients, when Eddie Hall pulled the like 1,100 pounds, I think. Yeah. He trained mentally, imagining he was picking up a car off his kids. So that's what he trained his mind to do, right? And he said when he went to go pull it, he wasn't even there. He didn't realize he just was where he trained his mind to be there. He thought he was picking a car up, but all of a sudden everything was black, and he stood at the top, and then he's like, oh shoot, I just picked up the 1,100 pounds. Cool. But that's what he did with his mind. He trained his mind that. So I had one of the female athletes I was working with, she had a couple of grudges with some of the guys at the gym. It was a friendly, banter. They give her a hard time a lot of times. So she trained her mind going to the meet, imagining pulling their heads off when she was down.
Oh my God.
That's graphic.
She did that for like 4 or 5 weeks going to the meet and hit a big deadlift PR.
Jesus.
Yeah.
Ripping heads off.
Oh, okay. Don't fuck with that chick.
No.
No, but like that's I mean, number one, you don't fail in front of Schwarzenegger. That's for sure. Yeah, but it seems like visualization is huge. Huge.
Yeah.
So I mean, how much is it really our bodies and how much is it really our minds when we do this stuff? Right? Like it's fucking crazy what we can do.
I know, well, I mean, whenever you ask people, like, what would you guys' opinion be? What would be the percentage you would say?
That's like the question of the day.
Yeah.
I do know that, like, I don't know. I don't know. Cause I'm like thinking of all the things that I've read in the past, like our bodies actually like our mind shuts our body down sooner so we don't injure ourselves. But as we train more, that percentage gets less and we're able to push further. So I think it's relative to each person's experience, but I don't know, maybe 50-50.
That's a good question. I think that it would fluctuate depending on your experience and your adaptability. I think that's hard. I'm going to go off of my other theory. So I would say if you're a newer lifter, then it's based off your mentality when you're trying to focus on form and technique and utilization of your compound movements. But as you get stronger and like you get more of your body to fire together and be efficient, then it's only near like max exertion, whether it's AMRAPs or whether it's, PR loads, whatever but then it's a lower percentage, but it's also more crucial. I don't know. That's interesting.
Mike, do you have the answer?
Yeah. Is there an answer? Don't tell me there's an
correct
answer.
To it.
There's no correct answer. Okay.
Okay, good.
Like, imagine he's at like a whiteboard doing a bunch of math. Right
Yeah.
Yeah. This is the flashback from The Hangover. It's Zach Galifianakis card counting.
This is what I do all the time. My brain is on fire most of the time.
That's great.
It's a question a lot of people when they first go work with a team or something, they'll ask people like, oh, how much do you think is mental? How much do you think is physical in your performance? And people always overestimate the mental. They always, the people like, oh, it's 90% mental, this and that. And it's definitely not 90% mental, But then you always follow it up with asking athletes, okay, how much do you train the mental side? And, none of them are doing anything.
Yeah.
That's kind of your end. Like, all right. So, and then, it takes a lot less time than people think, but the only research I saw, one sports psych, Nicole Dietland, I think her and her mentor, can't remember his name. And they said their research said 5% mental.
5%.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that was and they're both, they're sports psychologists, but that's the only person I saw that said they did some research on it. But some of that could be like you said, Madz, like it's that 5% mental, just like we talked, just your mind staying out of your way,
Yeah.
So, it becomes a lot bigger when you let your mind get in the way. So a lot of the training is just trying to get it, not to mess you up. You know what I mean? Just, when you're out there.
And visualization is absolutely key. I mean, hell, when I was 11 or 12, the night before a horse show, because I used to compete, I would run through the course in my mind, not knowing that I was visualizing. I had never spoken to a sports psychologist. I just did it because it made me feel better and more confident. So the next day I could go do the course. And even with the lifts as well, like putting myself in that position for nationals, because it was a new gym, or it wasn't a gym, it was a hotel. So that was odd, putting myself in a situation where it's like, these faces don't know me. I don't know these faces, and they might not be cheering for me either. Doesn't mean they're rooting against me. They're just not like all like go Madz. So I definitely visualized that. What I didn't visualize is getting a flat tire and being late to weigh-ins for nationals. Oh
How
gosh,
unfortunate.
everything worked. Oh my God. That made me so more mentally tough just going through that. And I learned a lot of what to do and what not to do. So next time will be better.
Well, so maybe, all right, Mike. So do you think, because the way I kind of think about it is our actions, the actions that we need to take are simple, but the decision to do them is the difficult part. Like to take our mind away from the habit of approaching something and seeing how uncomfortable it is and turning away from it just because that's habitually how our minds are. Like we can't get ourselves to do the thing, even though we can see the potential of it. We can see, the success or the growth behind on the other side of those actions, right? But then as you approach it, you have that very familiar discomfort, whether it be fear or anxiety or, whatever it is. And you can't get ourselves to make that jump. Is there a part of mental performance that helps with that?
Definitely. I think
I might be asking for myself.
one of the first things I like to do with everybody, if I have time in for session, is, we establish their why, right?
Yeah.
You're a lot less likely to quit on things when you have a purpose, and like really digging deep into that, like, why are you doing this? What does this mean? What do I value about this? Right. And in any part of your life, when you have that established and things are hard, then you're a lot more likely to get through it. You're a lot more likely to keep going. You're a lot more likely to finish that task when you know why you're doing it. When I first went back to school, and you got to take all these classes. Like I went back for a specific purpose, right? I knew what I wanted to do, and I'm in all these other classes that I'm like, I'm probably not going to use this, but I need to get an A in this class because I need to get into grad school because this is what I want to do. When you establish that ahead of time, then it's a lot easier to work through those things. You know why you're doing this, right? Mm-hmm. And so, just doing that, if you're lifting or if you're competing in anything, having that. And so when that moment comes, of course, you want to have other tools to kind of get your mind off it. It'll be different each time if we're talking about a max attempt still. But in general, doing that inner work of why am I doing these things, and what do I value about this? And what about this do I value in myself? And then when things are hard and you don't want to do it, it's very easy to still do it when you know why, right? When you don't have that place, you don't have that anchor, then it's a lot easier to be like, well, I'll do it some other time, or I just don't have to do this. Mm-hmm. We use different things to try to get there with the person. There's one cool one I stole from one of the performance coaches for the Dodgers, and he uses like one of those old nautical compasses, right? And so, it has the big north, south, east, west, and it has the small ones in between. I'll have someone draw that, and then I'll have them put down what they value about whatever it is that, the top 4 things. What are the big things? And then in between, put in, and what steps do you do to fulfill that? And then by the time they're done and they look at it, it's a lot clearer. Why am I doing this? And when motivation is lacking, whatever, I was like, lean into that. Take a picture of it, save it. That's yours. When you're not feeling up to it, you look at that, you'll know why you are doing this, right? So there's different ways to get there, but that's a very strong thing to do in life, is figure out why I'm doing everything I'm doing, and when it's hard, I'm a lot more likely to get through it and keep going if I have that why to anchor me. Let me see, what else were we talking about? If we were still talking about like max effort attempts and stuff,
I could talk about that all day.
Yeah. I mean, it's going to be, like I said, it's going to be different tools for different situations, whatever your mind's in the situation. Hopefully you have some tools at your disposal to kind of get you through it. Big thing, like we said, is how Madz was talking about earlier, that awareness of what was going on with her earlier this week in training, having that awareness of what is going on instead of just like, I don't want to do this, and being aware of that, figuring out using the tools she has to get her in the mindset to do it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so if we're talking about that, it's going to be different. If it's you're scared and your confidence and figuring out how to get confident, So I mean, my last competition was last summer, right? And my second attempt, I tore my quad, right? It was in the muscle belly, but it swelled up real fast. I had a big divot in there and everything. I was grateful it didn't detach from the tendon. So all right, but then it was like, what am I going to do the rest of the day? Am I going to keep competing? What am I trying to know? And when I did that meet on, like I did it 5 weeks notice, something like that. And literally at the time I signed up for that meet just because I was working with a lot of power lifters, and I'm big on the practice what you preach thing. And I was like, I'm going to do this competition and show that I can use these things too, and in my mind, when I envisioned it, it was going to be this perfect performance. That's how I was going to show how I was, doing all this. And then that second attempt said, nope. The powerlifting gods were like, you're going to have to show it another way. Mental skills is not for this. But, I stayed in it. I benched with no leg drive, whatever. And then I got into deadlift, and I considered, I was like, maybe I'll just take a token lift. I had in that federation, I got like an age group squat record. And I was like, maybe I'll just take a token and do that. I'm thinking about it. No, that's not me. That's not me. So I'm going to give 100% of what I have right now,
Mm-hmm.
And so, I dropped my opener by a little bit, I barely warmed up. And when I was waiting for my turn, I was so scared. I was so scared. I was like, I'm going to bomb out. I was already embarrassed by getting injured on the platform. And I was like, I'm going to go out there and flop like a fish on this thing. And everyone's going to feel bad for me. And I don't want that. And I no matter what I was doing, I could not control the thoughts. I couldn't control my self-talk,
Mm-hmm.
I was trying so hard, those gremlins, they just keep coming back. And so I had to come up with a different tool. What can I do? I got to do something to get my mind straight right now. And so you can use body language to increase your confidence, right?
Body language. Okay.
The research shows, standing tall, standing strong, standing like a Superman will literally tell your mind, I am confident. Just like slouching and stuff will tell your mind, I'm not confident, I'm not feeling good. And so I gave myself, I was like, this is my task. I was like, I'm going to stand here and look as confident as possible. I was like, I'm going to look, I just kept telling myself, I just look good in your singlet. I wanted to stand there and look strong and buff in my singlet. I was like, and I just focused so hard on that I didn't hear any of the thoughts. Right. And so you have to come up sometimes with other tools, and then literally I did that until it was my turn. And then I just told myself, pick this motherfucker up. And, and it went. And yeah, so when you talk about those max effort attempts, it's going to be different sometimes. You got to come up with something different. That's why you build up this tool set of things that you can use in the moment. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah.
I think I think something that happens a lot, and maybe it's deflection. Maybe that's what it is. Maybe it's us not realizing what mental strength will actually do for us. But it's people hear these simple things, these cliche things, these things that might seem surface level about mentality, like visualization, mantras, affirmations, all that kind of stuff. And people just kind of like, that's silly. Like, how is that going to work? And I think I'm starting to realize, like, above everything else, that those are the most powerful things when it comes to self-awareness and emotional control and I guess assessment and I don't know, and encompassing of good positive things like confidence and whatever else. I think I'm kind of losing track of what I'm saying, but I think that is more powerful than anything and creates potential and opportunity for everything that we want to do in life. Almost like its mentality is the basis of the foundation. Almost, maybe.
I like it.
Maybe getting too far out there.
Affirmations and mantras and stuff. I know some of the verbiage that we use, like people, like when you say that, people will think like, sitting in a quiet room on yoga mats and stuff.
Yeah.
I use the term with my clients, I just say deliberate self-talk, right? Because we spend too much time listening to ourselves and not enough time speaking to ourselves. Right? So you got to be deliberate with it. So coming up with mantras, affirmations, that's just deliberate self-talk. So it's just putting a plan in place. This is what I say to myself at this time. This is what I say to myself when I'm feeling this way. And having those things, like you said, it's just tools. Like I said, it's just tools in your toolbox, having these things. So when it happens, I know I say this to myself and it helps me feel better. I talk to myself this way, it helps me feel better, helps me get focused, it helps me get back in line, right? Otherwise, like, your thoughts just happen to you. If you don't figure out a way, whether it's stopping or whatever, it to try to refocus that, they're just gonna keep going, right? That's cognitive behavioral therapy. Thoughts affect your feelings, affect your behavior, which affect how you feel, then affects how you think, right?
Which then affects like how you act.
Yeah. And so it just keeps going. So we all know, we've all had times where when we started with those thoughts and they just snowball. If you don't figure out a way to bring them in, they're just going to snowball. And you're just going to feel worse. You're not going to get out of it. And you're going to feel worse. Then you're not going to do the things you want to do. And then you're going to feel worse about that. And so, maybe people look at like some of those ways you say about it, like mantra and affirmations. It's a soft term, but that's why I say deliberate self-talk. You're saying something to yourself on purpose. Simple as that. And it's important to have those. And our minds are so sacred. It's when you have a clear mind, everything's better, right? And so whatever it is, whatever tools you have in place to deal with those, have some tools, is whether it's just acceptance. That's a big thing with like mindfulness is accepting the thoughts and just seeing them float away, because they're just thoughts. They're just things. They can't actually affect you, if you don't want to let them. You know what I mean? But if you don't put any systems in place, it's gonna affect you. It's gonna take you down that rabbit hole. No matter where you are, what it is, competition or just trying to be happy.
That is a daily struggle I have to deal with my past eating disorder, is the thoughts, because it never goes away. It is always a voice in your head. So everything you just said, it's like I have a choice whether this affects me or what do I say to myself when I'm feeling like this, because it can have that snowball effect. But I certainly don't want to go back to where I was when I was in college. But yeah, those little voices creep up here and there. And obviously I'm better and I am stronger now to where I can smack those thoughts out of my mind very, very quickly. But if I did not have that tool set, if I didn't have those tools, then I wouldn't be where I am today.
Yeah, definitely.
And just so everybody can hear this, because I think this is majorly important. I think people get too worried about perfect. Madz, how many times does that not work?
Me shutting down the voices?
Yeah. How many times do you fail?
I failed in the past, but I mean, I wouldn't call it failure. I would call it like a relapse or like an episode. And that's if I like binge and purge, but that has not happened since, what was the date? June 24th of 2017, 16, 18. It's been a while. So, but once I started, I wanted to get better. Like, I'm just saying, like, I wasn't, when I said, I was like, oh, I don't have an eating disorder anymore, I'm cured. No, I still had times where I relapsed. But the exact date that I can't remember, I should know this. That is when I've like shut down the voices. So I have not failed yet, or I haven't relapsed yet. And I don't plan to in my life.
Oh no. Sorry, I didn't mean to pull out like specifics for you. I think it was just, I think all of us tackle something fairly unique, or we have to repeatedly every day tackle something unique. And I think people, and I'm saying this for myself for sure, I get so beat up, or I beat myself up so much on the days that I don't win, on the days that I give in to the gremlin, when I give in to the resistance, when it feels like it's too much for me. And it's taken me years, and I've gotten better. As maybe that's the big thing too, is it's just a practice, regardless of how abstract it feels or how structured it is, as long as that practice stays in play. But there's still days where I just fucking fail. Like, I don't want to record, or I don't want to write, or I don't want to do anything past the exhaustion point where my mind and body can't handle it anymore. And I think people really need to know that, is even when it comes to being really good and being successful and, being satisfied with where you are, you're still going to fuck up.
For sure. I think the hardest part is just showing up, like as a writer, as a lifter, as an athlete. Like 9 times out of 10, if you just show up to something, you're going to do something. Or like if you're a writer, sit in front of your computer for an hour every day and just have that consistent routine. If you're a lifter, just go to the gym and warm up, do your first set, see how you feel. If you don't feel good, then maybe you need another rest day. If you're, I don't know, I'm trying to think of this, any team sport, obviously you got to show up to practice. And usually if you just practice with your teammates, like, you're going to have some benefit. But yeah, for that, I would say just show up and have a consistent schedule to where you are putting something towards your goals. It doesn't have to be, perfect meal prep and you look amazing and your hair is done and your performance is great. Like, it could just be, I hit my protein goal today, or I went to the gym and did mobility work, or I wrote 1 sentence today, whatever that is. I think that more answered your question. Yeah.
Oh yeah, totally. Hey, Mike, what do you think?
I think some of, like, you were talking about your personal experience with, I think self-compassion is a big topic right now. And there's a lot of resilience to it just because the name, like we kind of talked about earlier with the mantra and affirmation. People hear self-compassion, they just think it sounds soft, right? And when people don't understand is self-compassion, the techniques and the theory is not about, sitting in the bathtub eating ice cream. I mean, that's self-indulgence.
Yeah, there's a difference for sure.
Self-compassion and accountability go hand in hand. Self-compassion and self-discipline go hand in hand, right? All it is that when you do something bad or out of character, you just realize that you're not bad, right? Like, I did something bad, I'm not bad. It's okay, I'm human, right? Now, what do I got to do to get better? And those are kind of the easy steps of that self-compassion process. I mean, the research shows people who are self-compassionate are much more resilient through hardships and failing than people who aren't. People who are hard on themselves and self-judge. Those are the people who don't get out of it. Self-compassion is understanding you're human and you're gonna not be perfect. But at the same time, once you do that, when you're mad at yourself, how clear can you be with your thoughts about how to get better? If you're just kicking yourself and you're down, like, you can't have that clear mind to be like, well, how do I get better at this thing? There's no plan. You're just down and just kicking yourself while you're down. And, speaking to yourself in a way you would never speak to somebody else, right? When we get in those situations, we talk to ourselves and we're like, I wouldn't talk to my friend or my sister like this. Why would we talk to ourselves like that? Right. So self-compassion is just that. It's realizing, like, all right, well, I didn't do what I wanted to do. I wasn't the person I wanted to be today. It's okay. It happened. I got to accept it happened. Right. I am human. I'm not going to be perfect. I can accept this happened. Okay. Now I can think clearly. What do I got to do to get better? Now I got to hold myself accountable. That's the last step in self-compassion. It's accountability. What do I got to do to be better? Right? You can't do that when your mind's clouded with this self-judgment.
Well, I think, and I come across random things, so I promise you, I would not be able to cite this here on this podcast. But I remember reading about a study that they did with so many random people. God, this is going to sound horrible, but more or less, they were rating the success, the success of these people, and they were finding that the people that were compassionate to themselves and the people that loved themselves were the most successful people, which is almost contradictory of the way that most people are taking their life on now, because they're so hard on themselves. And you hear, and maybe this is just a different way to approach it. And I don't, at what percentage of people do this, I don't know. But those guys that even like motivational speakers that are most of the time male, they're saying like, dude, you're a piece of shit. Shut the fuck up and do the work, And I know for sure that doesn't work for me. But the reason that study sticks out in my mind is because that was the type of thing that I needed. I needed to learn to be compassionate with myself and to love myself. And that moved me forward better than being a hard ass on myself. And like you were saying, like being the shit out of myself while I'm already on the ground.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, there's always exceptions. There's always some people who respond to some of those things. Motivational speakers, it's a tool. It's a great tool to listen to sometimes, get hyped up, whatever. But, the techniques aren't always grounded in anything but their own life experience. One person's life experience you can let that life experience inspire you. You can be inspired by the person's life experience, but don't expect yourself to be the same as that.
Mm-hmm.
You don't think just because this will work for this guy, obviously, like David Goggins is a different human being, right?
Insane.
And so like, I can't be like, oh, I'm going to read his book and then I'm going to be like, hey, he's a different human being. Like, it's kind of like, the sports psychology at its roots is the study of people and their behaviors in sport and performance, right? And so when it first started with Coleman Griffin back in the day, he started studying the athletes and the football team stuff at school. He was a psychologist and there was no sports psychology. So he started studying the athletes on campus and, we study what works, they see what works, and then you take it back to the lab and you research it with the other people and see like, oh, can we replicate this and will this work for in general, right? And so something like that, like it's not gonna, that works for that one person is not gonna work for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
And so like when you look at, I forgot where I was going with this. I was kind of going off when she was talking about using the imagery, right?
Yeah.
Some people will naturally do some of these things. Hank Aaron famously used imagery and visualization like crazy, right? There was no sports psych working with him. He just did it. He imagined every pitch, every possible scenario, every at bat, someone's on second, pitch count 1-2. I know this guy, I know what he throws. And you go through all that before the games. And there was no sports psych working with him, right? But we study these people and we figure out, and go back there and figure out, okay, this works. And so through that, you get techniques that should work for most people.
Mm-hmm.
Not going to work for everybody. It should work for most people. And things like that, like just, thinking you're going to be David Goggins, it's not going to work for many people, So, use it as a tool, let it inspire you, let it inspire you, let you hype you up, like put it on YouTube to go to work out, let his words inspire you. Don't expect to be him,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. No, it's, I think there's some outliers, and I think that it's because of social media and the internet, it's very easy to attach to extremes,
Mm-hmm.
And assume that that's who you are, that that's what you have to embrace. And I agree with you. I think it should be motivational, but you need to find your own way of doing it. Like you can get to that level logistically, in reality, you can get to their level, but you have to be willing to get there on your own path instead of trying to replicate somebody to a T and realizing that you're not going to handle things the way that they will, but you could handle things better in your own version than they could, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I think that's I think that's a good advertisement for why it's good to work with the mental performance coach if
Mm-hmm.
you're having these things for your sport or your performance, is that, like I said earlier, my job is to navigate the conversation,
Mm-hmm.
right? Ask the right questions, be present with them, be empathic, listen, and then, navigate that towards finding the answers that's already in them, right? That's literally what I do. It's just I try to navigate the conversation, find out the answers that are already in them, and then we put tools in place to do that stuff on purpose, you know? And so, yeah.
Yes, everybody go talk to Mike right now. Go book a session with him.
Do it. Just do it.
Do it.
Oh my
He's
God.
amazing.
So just a general question here, Mike, as we start closing up. So to me, sports psychology is becoming more and more accepted, I guess, or I mean, it's also seen as like something super beneficial, right? I read, I did not. I'm about to read, Tim Grover's book. You know what Tim Grover is, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think he's technically just a personal trainer.
Oh, what's the book called? I read it.
Oh,
I forgot. Is it Resilience?
Something like that. I'm probably way wrong.
was
We're going
a
to figure this
strength
out and I'll put it in.
coach.
What was that?
He was a strength and conditioning coach.
Okay,
He implemented a lot of like mental training into it, though.
Yeah, I was going to say, like,
yes. Did he only write one book or did he write two?
I think he's got two. I think he's got
okay.
two.
I've read one of them and it's pretty awesome. So enjoy it.
Yeah. Okay. Well, fantastic. But where I'm going with this is it also, even though there's a lot of resistance still, like even like therapy and counseling is being more accepted. So where do you see things like sports psychology taking us as we accept it more, like as we actually, we start to incorporate it and people realize how good of a thing this is? Because I think that the field that you're in is huge potential. It is. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, the industry is trying to steer more towards the performance psychology term. That's the first big thing, just because everything's a performance. These skills could be used for a lot of things. Okay. I know, like my mentor, he worked with a comedian, he worked with a pilot. I know. Well, I mean, Michael Gervais, I mentioned earlier, he sold his program to Microsoft. So every Microsoft employee goes through his mental training program that he made. Shit. Yeah, that he made for them to do online. Every single one. So he made a lot of money off that. But so they're trying to go more towards the performance psychology term to kind of broaden it out a little bit. Actually, one of my mentors he'd been in academia for 20, 25 years, something like that. He just took a job as a performance coordinator for a big esports company.
Really?
Yeah. So like they have like the #1 League of Legends team, all this stuff. I don't really know esports.
League of Legends? Fantastic.
Yeah. So he's like because he worked with them just as a sports psych for a season, and then they hired him he's director of performance. So now he's in charge of their sleep and their diets and everything. He's in charge of everything. So he has a whole team he's hiring to help him with that. But so that's the direction in the future is, people using sports psychology and other things, right? Other performances. Whether, Madz is an actor, like, same thing. It's a performance. You can use a lot of techniques. I remember one of the guest speakers in my class, he was a dancer. And so, you can use a lot of that stuff. I think that's the future of it is broadening out. I think it brings a lot of attention to mental health as far as for athletes. I think one of my mentors, he put it best, because people hear mental health and they just think about as far as like depression and stuff like that. And mental health isn't just the absence of mental illness, right? Mental health is positive thinking and pursuing goals and enjoying your life. That's the part where, when I tell people I work in mental health, that's where I help, like we said, the difference between what I do and a therapist. A lot of times people go to therapy because they're already, they're not in the middle. They're like in the decline point, right?
Yeah. Dealing with trauma.
Yeah. So like I'm more, if you're in the middle and I want to get you up here, right? And so, like you want to pursue a better life. We can do the work for that. You want to pursue a better time for sport. You know, that's, I think, probably the best part about it. You just enjoy things more. Your mind's clear. You enjoy things more.
Which
I hope in the
across,
future.
go ahead, Madz.
Oh, sorry. I hope in the future that sports psychologist mental performance becomes more normalized as like, oh, if you need help with training, you hire a coach. If you need help with nutrition, you hire a nutritionist or a dietitian. And then mental also. And it's more of like in this realm house of like who you have to help you with whatever your goals are. So I'm hoping it's just like, oh yeah, I have my trainer, I have my nutritionist, and my mental performance coach. So that's what I hope is for you guys in the future.
Definitely.
Yeah, I mean, the potential for this is amazing. Like the way you're talking about how it spreads across everything, that makes a lot of fucking sense, because that all influences the way businesses work, like how effective they are, how successful they are. That's going to affect obviously our sports. That's going to affect our relationships. That's going to affect, like, the back end of this is almost endless. Like it just keeps going. It's like the mental part of this is huge. Like performance psychology is, oh my God, like is there an end? I don't think so. Yeah, mind blow.
Definitely. And there's some guys out there doing that work, guys working with like high level executives and stuff. I know who's doing a lot of that. I had the book over here. The Brad Stolberg and Steve Magnus, they do a lot of that work with executive coaching and stuff.
Okay. Yeah.
There's people out there doing that work. So hopefully it just grows from there. And, you know, in, like Matt said, like in this one world, it'd be you know, hopefully it can grow as well, and people seek out that coaching, you know.
So through all of what we've been through today, what is the biggest thing that you want people to know, whether it be about your profession and whether it be about the effectiveness of what you do, and like, what do you want people to hear the most from this?
I mean, I think I'll refer like a couple of prompts that you sent me. I think the first thing is just, you know, speak nicely to yourself.
Yeah, dude.
That's an important thing. We talk a lot about it here, and you know, it's so important just to be happier, not even just sport. You mentioned one thing here, like what could we do right now? And I think one of the most important tools is breathe, right?
Or remember that you're breathing, right?
I'm gonna find the quote. There's a quote from a guy named George Mumford, who he actually, I mean, he worked with Tim Grover because he was actually the performance coach for the Bulls, and Grover was the strength and conditioning coach. So he was with the Bulls during their championship runs, and he was with the Lakers during their championship runs. He was Phil Jackson's guy, right? And his stuff's all based on mindfulness. But he has a great quote about the breath. He says, "You can be anywhere with any kind of stress or chaos, and your breath will always be there like the tides, moving in and out, connecting your mind to your body, and vice versa," right? And so learning how to breathe, learning how to find your breath is just probably the most important like tool there is, because when you're freaking out and everything feels out of control, and you learn how to use your breath, you take one breath and you take another breath, two things happen. First of all, physiologically, you bring your heart rate down, you activate that parasympathetic nervous system, you start to bring yourself down physically, so you don't feel those things, right? Two, when you feel like everything's out of control, you found one thing you could control. I can control my breath. Okay. That means that I can control myself. Okay. What task can I control next? Right? So that if there's one tool someone can take away from this podcast, you know, learn to find your breath. You know, because we all have those times, and whether it's your sport, your life, where it feels like everything's out of control, and you find your breath, you can bring yourself back to center, back to present, and then you can figure out what you got to do. So that if I can leave them with one tool, that would be.
Dude, I mean, it's perfect. I think it may sound simple, but when people really think about it, how often are you thinking about your breath, right? So if you can attach to that, what can you open yourself up to, right? Yeah, fuck yeah. Fuck yeah. That's a good way to end it. Mike, where does everybody find you? How do they find you to hire your ass and help them with whatever performance issues they're having? Because I know a lot of us this is tough for a lot of us.
Yeah. So I think the easy way is probably on, where everybody finds people nowadays on the gram.
The gram.
Yeah. My name's simple. It's just Michael Russell Jr. on there. You can also, well, everyone can see our names on here. So my email is basically that, Mike Russell Jr. at Yahoo. I also work for a company, a online sports psychology platform called Mind Ready. So, you can also book me through them, or, if you're interested and maybe like you don't think I'm a fit, there's, we have 40 coaches. I think 50 coaches now, yeah. And maybe you're interested in this, but maybe I'm not the guy you want to work with. You can we have great coaches on there. And so yeah, that's the third place to find me.
Perfect, man. Madz, where's everybody find you?
Muscle Madz on Instagram, musclemads.com, musclemads at Gmail, Twitch, TikTok, YouTube, Muscle Madz everywhere, Twitter. I just took that name across the board, but
I need to get on your social media.
Yeah, seriously, take over all of Mike Russell Jr. That is your new title.
Honestly, I mean, in secret, I know this is going to be open to a lot of people, but that like once you have so many social medias that tack up the same exact reference, it helps with SEO and it helps, people recognize because there's more that's popping up. This is my basic understanding of optimization.
Well, no, 100%. Like if you just Google Meg, everyone knows Meg squats, and then it leads to all the other things. It's like, okay, well, I'm going to take over Muscle Madz with a Z at the end, not an S, because there is another person it's Muscles by Madz with an S. And I was like,
Ooh.
Oh no. So I was like, no, Muscle Madz, all one word, Z at the end, done. That's mine. So Mike, you gotta create take over the internet with your name.
Yeah, dude, you gotta play it up. People gotta see those biceps, bro. Keep those videos going.
No, people told me switching over the content, I got to stop doing that. I was like, well, when I first switched over my account, everyone's like, oh, you should have a separate business one. I was like, yeah, but all the people I know is on here. And then they're like, well, you got to stop doing that stuff. I was like, well, in my industry, like it's a person industry, it's a people industry, right?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I got to be myself. You're going to sit there and talk to me for an hour. You got to know something about me maybe and think like, all right, well, I talked to him, And so, yeah, like I was, all right, I felt like I was relatable. So
yeah, be you. Always be you.
Yeah, fuck yeah, man. I think when it comes to work with humans, like the closer you work with humans, I think the less you have to have a separate identity. I think it's more about you being the brand. Because I had 2 separate accounts and it was almost exhausting, not because of the amount of work that it did to do it separately. And posting that much separately wasn't that big a deal, but like I was almost trying to turn myself off and on to 2 separate profiles. So I think it just depends on how you want to make your system work. But I try to use myself as the representation of my brand and do everything through one. It makes more sense to me. And it's a little bit easier on the mind. So yeah, guys, if let's button this up. It was fantastic to have you both. I'm so glad this is the first three-way conversation I've had. Sorry about that. I didn't. Sorry.
I love it.
Me.
That was great.
So, but it was fantastic to have you both. Madz, it was great to hear from you again. Mike, it's so great to meet you. Thank you both for being on here.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
This was awesome.
Thanks everybody out there for joining the podcast. Stay strong and stay rebel-minded. I'm your host, Zach. Out. Hey guys, I hope that all things we've brought here, including the people, have helped you change the way that you see the world. And if it has, then it would help us so much if you leave a rating and a comment on iTunes or give any feedback wherever you listen to the RMP. Thank you for listening in, and don't forget to follow and subscribe. Question everything, my friends. Dude, where's your mind go? Like, how are you referencing all this shit in your head? Like, I don't, probably should have
It's
not
his
said anything
biceps.
about
That's
that
where he
article.
stores all
It's
the
your fucking
knowledge.
biceps. Is that where you store your
The
information?
biceps.
Those fucking biceps. Now I know why you released those bastards out into the open.
A lot of it, you just, I mean, through school, you learn the stuff. I don't know, you read the references and the stuff. I didn't want to get too nerdy with it, but.
Oh, dude, you be fucking you, because yeah.
But it's good to keep updated on that. You go to the conferences and you hear some of the people who've been in it, and especially if they stay in academia, it's like you're like trying to write down, like, what was that research? I don't know. I've never heard any of this.
It's like you're listening to a textbook.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, and I respect the shit out of it. There's some people that I follow. There's one book that it's probably going to take me a couple years to get through, legitimately, just because my comprehension of the material. He talks about multiple intelligences, so it's really fascinating to me. But the way that he speaks throughout the book is like, my mind burns up after a chapter. Like, I fucking can't follow, man. And so I come across people that are more, I kind of have a little bit more of like a logistics mind or engineering kind of mind, and like factual and scientific based. And I'm like,
that's what I'm.
Keep saying that
to.
stuff.
Anytime he talks about his schoolwork or work, I'm just like, I love you.
Yeah, Madz, you just have to smile.
Doing
You have
a
a great
good job.
smile. Just keep smiling. It's not going to matter to him, for real.
Smile and wave, boys. Smile and wave.